Are all the alpha males actually gay? Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm going to talk about a somewhat controversial topic right now, but it's been coming up a lot in the media right now. I have made some videos talking about like Andrew Tate and his impact on the world in other videos, but I've tried not to spend too much time talking about the sort of like alpha male podcast bro world. I don't really like talking about them too much because I kind of almost feel like if we talk about them less, they might go away. But one of the things that I'm noticing a lot now is a lot of people calling out some of the alpha males for being gay. And I wanted to address that because there's actually some parts of that discussion that I don't see talked about enough. And I think it's something that's really important to talk about in our society because it is something that's actually quite relevant. And I think especially with a lot of the stuff coming out, literally coming out about Diddy and things like that, that I think are really important to talk about. So before we get into this, like, I am certainly not an expert in LGBTQ studies. I'm not making this video at all to question any kind of alternative lifestyles. I think honestly, as long as everybody in the situation is a consenting adult, like a fully consenting adult, love who you love, and none of this is a commentary on whether or not people should be gay or straight or any kind of judgment about that. But generally speaking, the pushback to a lot of these alpha males who seem to have a very questionable relationship with their sexuality, the pushback is because of the hypocrisy. Because they typically are males who are very anti-gay or who use calling somebody gay as being an insult, calling people gay for doing things that are just like normal everyday things. It's just they don't like them and they're using the term gay as an insult when they themselves are doing things that, you know, do make it seem like they could potentially be gay themselves. A lot of that could be shame within themselves. You know, oftentimes there's a lot of projection. If, say, for example, you happen to be ashamed of the fact that you were attracted to somebody of the same gender as you may then start shaming people who are openly gay because you wish that you could be more open about that, or because you're judging it within yourself, so you're judging it in somebody else. I mean, that's a very common thing for people to judge in others, the thing that they're ashamed of in themselves. That doesn't just go for sexuality, it goes for a lot of different things. It's a very common thing. It's not healthy by any means. It's not something that should be encouraged, and if you are somebody who's doing that, I encourage you to do some work on yourself, because holding that much shame in yourself isn't healthy, as much as projecting that onto other people isn't healthy either. But one of the factors in this conversation that I don't think we talk about enough, and I think I've mentioned this in other videos, but I kind of wanted to make a video about this specifically because I think with a lot of the stuff that we're talking about when it comes to Diddy, it's something that I think needs to be discussed more, because I'm also seeing a lot online of women basically who are in relationships with men who then find out that that man has been sleeping with men, not knowing that that man was, you know, having an affair with men, and not knowing that that man was, say, bisexual, for example, or something like that. It's a delicate thing because I don't want this to get misinterpreted, but when someone is, I would say, a sociopath, a psychopath, and somebody who has probably a very high level, I would say, of narcissistic personality disorder. Definitely people who have that kind of category of personality disorders. One of the factors in those disorders is that they don't have empathy for people. And when you don't have empathy for people, particularly at a very high level of lacking empathy, you don't tend to humanize people. People just become objects, things that you can use for your own benefit in some way. And when you are someone who lacks that empathy and who doesn't humanize people, oftentimes you will seek pleasure, gratification of some kind from anything. It doesn't actually matter what the gender, what the age, what the circumstances are. It's just about what that person can do for you. So technically, somebody who falls under that category, sociopath, psychopath, narcissistic personality disorder, things like that, oftentimes it's not about whether that person is male or female. It's not about the gender. It's simply about what that person can do for them. That's different than somebody, say, being gay or bisexual. You can be, say, bisexual and humanize the person that you're with. You just happen to be attracted to both genders. for example. That doesn't make you a sociopath or a psychopath or anything like that, right? Whereas if somebody is somebody with one of those extreme personality disorders where they don't humanize somebody, they don't really care if that person is male or female. It's not the same thing as being bisexual. It simply means that they will take the gratification that they can get from whoever happens to be giving them access to it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that every sociopath or every narcissist or whatever will sleep with both men and women. It's not universal, but it is very common. If this person happens to be like a very genuine, empathetic person, they're just struggling with their sexuality, that's a different situation. And my heart goes out to people who are doing that. I think everybody should be allowed to kind of, you know, be who they truly are and love who they love. But I think it's also fair to look at this situation where we keep throwing around this person's gay, this person's straight, or labeling things, not getting to the root of, okay, but does this person even have the empathy or the capacity to humanize the person that they're with? Or are they simply just preying on whoever is vulnerable or whoever they think that they can manipulate to get what they want from them? I think one of the things that really stood out to me, it was kind of like a light bulb moment when I kind of realized this, was a video that Andrew Tate released. This was, I think, before he was banned on social media, where he basically started a conversation with his audience. This might get a little graphic, but I'm gonna try to make this as clean as possible, where he basically brought up the idea that, like, would you as a man rather sleep with like Megan Fox with a dick or Hulk Hogan with a vagina? There were apparently a lot of guys that were his followers that were saying that, like, they would pick the one with the vagina because they're a straight man and they would prefer that body part on a woman. And Andrew Tate was making the argument that if you can get someone as hot as Megan Fox that has a dick, then that's a better deal. Like, essentially, that would be a person who essentially was born a male but obviously was in the process of transitioning to be a female, which I find interesting because it's oftentimes the people in that world that are the most anti-transgendered, and I'm not going to get into that debate right now because I know that's a whole rabbit hole in itself. I just want to point out the irony there. What he's actually saying in that conversation is that he actually doesn't care about the gender of the person that he's with. He solely cares about the image and like what that person could do for him sexually, not about the actual gender that he is attracted to. There's a lot of videos, I've talked about this in other videos, and there's a lot of people that have videos out there. Andrew Tate, love him or hate him, exhibits a lot of signs of being a sociopath. That is a very common thing when it comes to people with, you know, that type of personality disorder, is that, again, they don't humanize the person that they're with. So the gender is somewhat irrelevant. It doesn't necessarily make them gay or straight or bisexual or anything. They don't humanize the person that they're with. I find that very interesting because he does have so many followers, sort of like a lot of guys who worship him, who have started these podcasts, or these podcast bros who worship the ground he walks on and have that same mentality. A lot of the drama was coming up with the Fresh and Fit situation and Fresh getting a woman pregnant and Fit flipping out. If you're not familiar with that drama, I applaud you for obviously not getting sucked into drama on the internet. I'm not going to dive into that whole dynamic, but if you are familiar with Fresh and Fit, which is another podcast situation, which are two like podcast guys who were Andrew Tate worshipers, they're like friends with him, whatever. Fit is somebody who frequently tries to call out other guys as being gay. There were a lot of pictures of Fit with guys in some very kind of questionable situations and interactions, and so it started to look a little bit like, oh, is Fit actually gay? Is he not? I don't know if he is. I don't know if he's not. There does seem to be a lot of evidence that women may not be his preference, and I've actually seen a lot of people that have taken some clips from some of Fresh and Fit's podcasts that do kind of lead you to believe that Fit at least may not be just interested in women. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's not true. I don't really know, but he certainly doesn't respect women. He certainly has a lot of anger issues towards women. A lot of these guys, generally speaking, a lot of these podcast guys do tend to blame women for everything. He clearly doesn't have any empathy for women. I know he's had women on his show that have basically said that they were, you know, SA'd, and he's basically told them it was their fault. So he clearly has a serious lack of empathy, at least publicly. And if you have such a lack of empathy and such a hatred towards women, you have to ask yourself, would he really be capable of having a relationship with a woman? And would he actually be capable of really connecting in intimacy with a woman? Now, he may be able to show up and do the deed and have sex completely disconnected, but would he actually be able to have more than just a superficial sexual experience with a woman if he has that deep a hatred for women? I actually remember reading this was like ages ago. I think I was in college or something, where they talked about, I think it was ancient Greece. I remember them talking about the idea that like men were so misogynistic, essentially. And again, I don't know how accurate this was. I don't remember the quote exactly, but there's a mentality that men had in those ancient times that like women were just for procreation. So men would sleep with women in order to like have families, but that men would have sexual relationships with other men because they didn't believe that women were like as smart as men. Like you couldn't actually have a connection with women because women were just baby making factories, and that men were the people that you could actually have like a connection with, like an intellectual connection with. Again, I don't know how accurate this was, but I do see a lot of that happening in like the alpha male space, right? I'm not talking about masculine feminine energy dynamics. When I talk about alpha males, I'm talking about a very specific group of like podcast bros that have a really messed up idea of like what masculinity is, that don't actually represent like healthy masculinity in any way. I'm talking about a group of men who actually just show up and like blame all their problems on women and basically just have these podcasts to like bash women. And they clearly don't have any respect for women as humans. So it's not that far-fetched that if these men believe that women are essentially just, I mean, again, that's why they target women who are basically only between the ages of like 18 and 22, because they basically are just the most fertile. So women are really just for procreation or just for submission or whatever, but that it's men that they have like the intellectual connection with. Like they only see women as being like objects for use for whatever, procreation or something. It's not that far-fetched that these men, if they really believe you can only have a true connection with another man, it's not that far-fetched that they would also decide to have a physical relationship with another man as well. In that situation, it's a fine line as to whether or not that would actually be considered gay, or if that actually would fall under the category of having a personality disorder. I don't want to come across like I'm being judgmental to people who are actually gay or bisexual or have some other kind of sexual orientation, because that's not the point of the video at all. Are these guys like actually gay and they're just acting this way because they're trying to cover it up? Absolutely possible. The fact that these guys have so much of a lack of empathy for other people also leads me to believe that this may be beyond just a sexual attraction, and it may have more to do with just using people as objects for their own gratification, which is not the same thing as simply being attracted to somebody of the same sex as you. I mean, as someone who has been in the arts and creative fields over the course of my life, I've spent a lot of time around, you know, people who were, you know, homosexual or bisexual or had some kind of alternative lifestyle, and many of them had empathy, and many of them saw people as humans and were actually incredibly like loving people. I've also, because I've been in a lot of creative fields and the entertainment industry and things, I've also been around a lot of people who were narcissistic and very likely sociopaths and things, who lacked empathy, who would engage in interactions with both men and women and didn't humanize the person that they were with. And I personally would not put those people in the same category. I really do believe it's a different thing. Like I've mentioned before, I have a video talking about like the dark side of Hollywood and the situations with Diddy and everything, and you know, again, I mentioned this in the other video, but like I do think it's like actually really sick how, you know, we've known about, say for example, like the R. Kelly situation for years. It's been like a joke for years, and because people could justify him targeting underage girls for so long. But when things start coming out about Diddy and potentially targeting underage boys, all of a sudden it's like we have to protect the boys and we have to take him down, and it's like this big thing when it's like all children should be protected from predators. But there's been a lot of stories about Diddy hiring female prostitutes. I mean, he had kids with women. I don't really know that much about Diddy as a person, but my guess is somebody at that level of power, it may not even necessarily be about sexuality. It may simply be about power, or it may just be about using people for gratification. Very often people that have, you know, these personality disorders, sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists, they'll target people who are very young. Some of it does have to do with, again, porn addiction, because in porn addiction, it kind of like normalizes the taboo. It makes people constantly need a more kind of like edgier, more dramatic hit of adrenaline. So like just having a regular sexual experience will seem like it's not enough because you've kind of conditioned yourself to need something edgier and something more taboo and stuff. And I'm sure that a lot of these alpha males, and I'm sure a lot of these guys in power, probably also have a lot of addictive tendencies, probably to porn and things like that. And I think especially in the alpha male community, where they use calling somebody gay as being an insult when they themselves have kind of admitted in some cases that they actually would sleep with a man or have thought about sleeping with a man or something, but yet they don't somehow think that that's gay because they can justify it in their mind. It may be that they actually are gay and they just have not dealt with that situation within themselves, and that's entirely possible. And I think that's sad that anybody would feel like they wanted to be in a relationship with somebody of the same gender and they felt like they couldn't be for whatever reason. I think that's a sad situation for anybody to be in. But when you do have people in those situations who have such a serious lack of empathy and have a tendency to not humanize people anyway, that's often what you're gonna find. It's not necessarily about the specific gender or about their specific sexuality. It is simply about using people as a means for their own sexual gratification, whoever that is. Because again, they don't humanize the person anyway, so it really wouldn't matter what gender the person was. Again, I think it's probably pretty likely that you're seeing that with powerful people in Hollywood. My guess was probably Diddy is probably in that category. I don't know that for sure. Again, it's just my guess, it's just my assumption. But men in that level of power probably got there because they probably lacked a lot of empathy for people. Not everybody who's high up in power lacks empathy. I don't think everybody who's in a powerful position is a narcissist or a sociopath or anything. I'm not saying that at all, but some are. I definitely think that somebody like Andrew Tate probably is. He has a lot of signs of being a sociopath. Many cult leaders tend to be sociopaths, and I definitely think that Andrew Tate, I would consider him a cult leader. And I think a lot of the alpha male bros and stuff are kind of like sort of his followers that then have kind of created their own platforms. I don't know, it's kind of like an alpha male pyramid scheme maybe, I don't know. And I want people to be aware because I don't think it's healthy, particularly for the young boys that follow them, to be following people who are sociopaths, because following people who actually lack empathy and don't humanize people is a very unhealthy thing. We don't need more people like that in the world. I absolutely do believe that we need more healthy male role models for boys especially, even for adult men, because we do need more male role models and father figures and things like that in our society. I think that's really the only way we're going to get better. Unfortunately, having a bunch of guys on a microphone that are basically just bashing women and treating women like crap and then basically just using people for their own gratification is not a healthy way of being a role model for boys. So I hope we can call awareness to how unhealthy these role models are for young boys. But again, if these guys are actually gay, let them be gay. I hope they can actually come to terms with that within themselves and actually just, you know, find a loving relationship. I think everybody deserves to be in a loving relationship. If they are just involved in this because they just want to use people out of sexual gratification, then I hope they get what's coming to them, to be honest with you. That's just a horrible way to live, and I feel bad for the people that end up being victimized by that. But I talk about this more because I've been seeing so much online of women talking about finding out that the men that they're in relationships with are actually sleeping with men. If somebody is bisexual and they're attracted to both men and women, they are still capable of being in a committed relationship if that is what they choose. If somebody commits to being in a monogamous relationship with you, then you deserve to have that person keep their word. And if they can't keep their word, then they're not someone that you should be in a relationship with. Point blank period, regardless of the sexual orientation situation. Obviously, if somebody is still figuring out their sexuality, they have to figure that out in their own time, in their own way. I do think that they should be also held accountable for keeping their word, for their commitments and things like that. And these men may be in the closet and just not accepting that within themselves, which is not fair to the woman in the relationship by any means. But it may also be that these guys are narcissists or sociopaths. It's a lot more common than I think people want to realize, and at the end of the day, you deserve better than to be in a relationship with someone who's just going to use people for their own sexual gratification. But I think awareness of this and awareness of paying attention to the warning signs, I think, is really important as a woman. Really, I wanted this video to be more about awareness because I think there's a lot of women walking around being like, I don't know how to deal with this. And it's like, well, okay, if this man actually is exhibiting signs of potentially being a narcissist or a sociopath, chances are you're very likely going to end up in this situation. Maybe not necessarily that they end up sleeping with other men, but they're probably going to end up sleeping with other women or somebody, because they're not really going to have any empathy for you and you're part of the situation. They're going to end up sleeping with other people. And I've talked about this in other videos, but I have very frequently debunked the idea that men can cheat on their partner and still love them. They can't. Like, it's actually not possible to love your partner and cheat on them, because if you're actively doing something that you know will hurt your partner just for your own gratification, that is not showing up in love for your partner. It's not possible. And I know a lot of people are going to argue that, well, no, men can. No, you can't. Because if you as a man believe you should be the protector and provider, you want to be the masculine energy in the relationship, you want to be the protector and provider, if you step outside the relationship and sleep with somebody else, first of all, you're exposing your body to things you could contract from other people. And actually, if you are engaging in same-sex relationships, you actually are more susceptible to contracting illnesses simply because of the nature of that kind of sexual interaction. You tend to be exposing yourself to more things that you could then bring back to your partner, which is actively not protecting your partner. You're actually putting your partner's health at risk in that situation. If you are engaging in sexual interactions with a female, you are potentially creating new life, because no sex is 100% safe. If you do potentially create a baby with another, if you are having an affair with another woman, your resources for providing for your family at home are now going to be split, because you're going to be required to use some of your resources to support another family that you have now created. Either that, or even if you as a man are incapable of connecting emotionally to a woman, because men do typically have an easier time detaching their emotions from their sexual interactions. Women have a harder time detaching the two. But you now step outside your relationship, you have another person that is now emotionally bonded to you. That affects your relationship. There's so many ways that you as a man stepping outside of your relationship and having an affair negatively affects your partner, that is the very definition of not showing up in love for your partner. And you can say, well, I still feel love for her. It's amazing how many men are like, the masculine's about facts over feelings, but yet you still think that love is a feeling. No, love is an action. It's you loving your partner. So if you as a man are arguing, well, I can still feel love for my partner and still cheat on her, it doesn't work like that. Like, why is all of a sudden the feeling of love more important than the fact of you actually intentionally hurting your partner for your own gratification? It doesn't make sense. Like, it's a completely hypocritical argument, which is an argument that a lot of these alpha males make. And I could do a whole video probably on all the hypocrisy of the alpha male red pill bro mentality and stuff. I'm not gonna dive into that. I just wanted to talk about this particular situation. But I do think that we need to be more aware of the fact that sometimes it's not just as simple as somebody having a certain sexual orientation. There are people out there who it's really not about sexual orientation. It's simply about their own lack of empathy and their own sexual gratification. I do think, and I've talked about things like porn addiction and things like that, I think that absolutely contributes to some of this mentality. As I've mentioned in other videos, addiction can very much mimic narcissistic personality disorder. So I think there's a lot of overlap there. But definitely if you were dealing with, somebody with an active addiction, particularly a porn addiction, if you're dealing with somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, not a matter of just calling everybody a narcissist, but somebody who actually has narcissistic personality disorder, or a sociopath or a psychopath, if you're dealing with people in that situation, those personality disorders, you are very likely going to find that they don't humanize the people that they're with. And oftentimes when you get men in these situations, and I'm not saying that women can't be, although I'm pretty sure that the stats show there's never been a diagnosed female psychopath. Incredibly rare for women to be sociopaths, like very uncommon. And it's much less common for women to be narcissists than it is for men to be narcissists. Not saying all men are narcissists, but it's much less common in women than it is in men. This does tend to affect men more often than it does women. But when men have these certain personality disorders and they tend to be very misogynistic or get involved in, maybe while seeking father figures or mentors or seeking other people in their life or other men like them or other men they can take advantage of or things like that, when they do become so misogynistic and they have that deep, deep hatred towards women, they're not going to be able to have an intimate connection with a woman. Like, you're not going to be able to have a relationship with a woman. Now, most people with these personality disorders aren't actually going to be able to have an intimate connection regardless, because you can't have an intimate connection with somebody if you don't have empathy. It's just not possible. However, if they do have this sort of like deep hatred and mistrust and resentment of women, it's not that shocking that they would then decide to just associate with men. Some of them will still use women for sexual gratification, but they may just decide, hey, if I'd rather be around men because I hate women so much, maybe I'll just have a sexual relationship with men. Whether you want to label that as gay or not, your decision. I'm not telling you what to label it or what to call it. I personally believe that's something that's a little bit different than somebody who just simply happens to have a sexual orientation that is not heterosexual. But you call it what you want. I mean, this isn't really about what to label it. I just want people to be more aware of this. If you are dealing with a man who, you know, maybe you don't know who he's messing with, who he's not messing with, you should really look at like, okay, does this guy actually humanize people? What are his views on women in general? Because if he really hates women, there's probably something behind that, right? In my experience, most guys who are openly gay, generally speaking, tend to actually be more pleasant to be around as a woman than straight guys oftentimes. So again, if you have a guy who is interested in sleeping with men who like really hates women, there might be something behind that. So I realize this video is probably gonna be pretty controversial. I really just want to make this video because I think that some of these things are just not being talked about. Like, we're talking a lot about the alpha males, the bros, like, are they gay, are they not gay? I just think this is an aspect to the conversation that not enough people are talking about. That when you're dealing with people that actually have certain personality disorders, it's a different conversation than just, well, are they gay and are they hiding it? Maybe they are, but there might be more to it than that. And I think it's fair to look at that situation. And I think also sometimes too, when you have guys who are desperately seeking a father figure, who are desperately seeking some kind of validation, or, you know, maybe some kind of, you know, if we're talking about the entertainment industry, some kind of success or a gatekeeper or something, there's a lot of guys who may actually simply put their sexuality aside because they figure it's just more important that they get the end game than to actually follow along with their own sexuality. I just think that some of these conversations are important to have, because I don't think that things are just like as black and white as a lot of people want to make them. But yeah, this video could be really controversial and could piss off a lot of people, I suppose. You know, I've pissed off people before. So again, I didn't want to make this video to like judge or shame anybody that has an alternative lifestyle or somebody who may just, you know, be non-heterosexual. I don't really know what the terminology is nowadays I'm supposed to use. Again, I'm old, please bear with me. If you are non-heterosexual and, you know, everybody is a consenting adult, I really hope that you find love. I hope you find connection. I hope the world learns to accept you. I hope you learn to love and accept yourself. And, you know, I wish you all the luck and happiness in the world. I truly do. But I also think that it's really fair to talk about some of these conversations when it comes to people that actually have personality disorders. And it's not necessarily so much about sexual orientation. It's actually about their personality disorder, their lack of empathy, and using people for their own gratification. I just think the more we can be aware of these things, the more we can kind of go into relationships and human interactions with people with our eyes open. I think too, also, like, the more we're aware of some of these dynamics, the less scary it can be. So when we do actually have interactions with somebody who is, you know, say gay, most gay men are not out like targeting straight men to try to convert them. In fact, in all the years that I've worked with, you know, gay men over the years, I've never once seen a gay man try to convert a straight man by any means. I've seen some have crushes on straight men, but like never actually like aggressively try to convert them. Whereas you do see more often men who have a more sociopathic tendency, or men who lack empathy, will be more likely to, say, target somebody to try to lord power over them, to try to manipulate them and get them to do things for their own sexual gratification, in the same way that they would with women. And I think also being aware of some of these things can actually help people be more comfortable around people that might, you know, be of a different sexual orientation than them, because they might understand that dynamic a little bit more. Again, I'm sure that this could be controversial, but I really hope that we can go into the world with more awareness, because I do think the world needs more love. I just think that we need to be aware of some people in the world that tend to ruin it for the rest of us. I think we need to be aware of some of the people in the world, and be very careful of the people we follow, and be very careful of the people that we sort of let be role models to the next generation. So yes, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you have any thoughts on this video, the comments end up getting too controversial, I might have to moderate them, but you know, I'm open to different points of view and different perspectives and stuff. I just ask that you keep things, you know, respectful. I did my best to keep things respectful in this video, so I hope that you can do the same. So yeah, any comments, thoughts on this video, other video suggestions or anything, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you and I love your suggestions. If you want to sign up for my online courses, master classes, or my guided journal, details in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.